Welcome to Weird Web Radio, an explorer's guide to hidden worlds of the paranormal and occult, reality-expanding experiences, and the downright weird and bizarre. With your host, Lonnie Scott.
Welcome to another episode of Weird Web Radio. In this episode, I'm going to be talking to the current ADF Archdruid Jon Drum. We cover everything from how he got into Druidry, what it's like to be a pagan leader today, and how all of this shapes his own path and what he thinks we can do to develop paganism even today. Now, if you're not a member of the Facebook Weird Web Radio discussion group, go on over to Facebook and search for it. It's easy to find. Click join. I'll be happy to add you. If you think this show's worth $1, go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio and help support the show. You can also go to weirdwebradio.com and just click join the membership. In the meantime, I don't want to stand between you and getting to know Jon, so grab your favorite drink, make a little popcorn, stay weird out there, my friends. Enjoy the show. Jon, welcome to Weird Web Radio. Thank you for being here, sir. It's quite an honor to have you.
Thank you, Lonnie. It's great to be here.
Okay, now in the interest of full disclosure to everyone who's listening to the show, you are the Archdruid of the ADF currently, and I am a member of the ADF, an occasional dedicate program mentor, and I actually helped build a proto-grove in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. With all that said, that doesn't mean I'm going to take it easy on you, okay?
That's fine.
Now, when I get started with these interviews, I like to get good and deep real fast,
okay,
and then see where it takes us. So, with that said, what is one thing that you believe to be true about Druidry beyond any skepticism or doubt?
I believe that I believe in the Earth Mother, which is a part of our liturgy and kind of a part of our cosmology in a way. And I firmly believe that there's a presence there and that she really is the firm foundation on which we stand. So first and foremost, I think that's one thing that I hold to be true.
Now, why is, of all things involved in Druidry today, why is it that the Earth Mother is the thing that stands out most to you?
I think that it's for a couple of reasons. One, American Druidry really comes from the RDNA, the Reformed Druids of North America. And they, the Earth Mother was central to their practice and to their focus. And it came about really because of a sense of environmentalism in 1963, which at the time was fairly progressive. And I think that, if you look around, I really see the natural world as really what's the core part of Druidry. We are part of the natural order, and we live with the nature spirits. And I think that we live with the nature spirits on the Earth Mother. So I think that's where my foundation comes in.
Do you, do you worship the Earth Mother within a specific cultural lens, or are you just approaching her with this term Earth Mother?
Not necessarily a cultural lens. I mean, I do follow several hearth cultures, and they have different slices or views of the Earth Mother. But I think I'm talking about a more generic and just kind of the concept of this Earth Mother, this entity on from where we come, where we live, and where we return.
Okay, well, that's cool. Now, how did you get started on your pagan path?
Wow. I took a course when I was in 8th grade, and we read Edith Hamilton's mythology. And when we studied the Greek gods, and we took a test. And on that test, there was a question that said the Greek gods are still worshipped today. This was probably 1971. And I said, well, in my mind, I thought this is obviously an easy question. It's true. So I said it's true, and I got the paper back, and it was false. They're like, oh, no, the Greek gods are, that nobody worships them anymore. And I really felt kind of at a loss because I felt that the stories of the Greek gods were really pretty vital and, really spoke to me So at that point, I decided that, my belief system, I really believed that the Greek gods were something that existed and something that should be followed. So that was really my entry kind of innocently into paganism. I went from kind of being a proto-pagan to going to Catholic school the next year. And then I started doing kind of some simple, maybe primitive magical workings. First and foremost with Aeolus, the god of the winds, and it kind of blossomed from there.
Okay, so the Greek myths give you the kickstart that you were looking for,
right.
Or maybe you didn't even know you were looking for it. That's not uncommon, really. That book, I think, found its way into a lot of young hands, especially when you're talking about an era in which there's almost nothing probably available in libraries, even that says this is how you get started. This is how you start. This is how you build a relationship with pagan gods, and XYZ gets you there.
Right.
Now, you went from 8th grade getting inspired by Edith Hamilton's retelling of the myths. How does that lead to today? There's a lot of stuff going on between 1971 and 2018.
Right. Well, what happened was, I started to kind of observe the seasonal changes, the solstices and the equinoxes. I can't tell you why. It wasn't that Edith Hamilton said you must do these things. They just seemed really important to me. And so I just honored them in my own way. I would try to go out on the day and try to, sense at the time, if I could, that the seasons were changing. I would go outside and see if I could feel anything or sense anything in that movement. So that brings me about to, I read as many books as I could on Greek mythology because that seemed to be the most readily accessible. And then in probably the late 70s, I get into college. I had I was a philosophy major at the University of Illinois. And so we studied some pre-Socratics, really are what caught my interest. And when I read about the pre-Socratics, they talked a lot about the gods, and it made sense to me. I mean, it was a very primitive way of looking at natural phenomena, but the talk of the gods really resonated with me. The idea of one god, especially the Abrahamic methodologies that, I was introduced to by my parents, didn't seem to resonate with me very much. So in 1981, I think, so 10 years after Edith Hamilton, I buy this book, or 1980, called Drawing Down the Moon by Margot Adler. And that was an eye-opening experience for me because I thought, oh my goodness, there's something out there. So that was really a formative book for what I was going to do with my practice. I also read a book by John Mitchell called The View Over Atlantis. And it talked about ley lines, and it also talked about, people, pre-Christian people, and it called them pagans. And all of a sudden, I had a name for what I felt and what I believed in. So I thought, wow, I'm not the only person out there. It was kind of this awakening to I'm not alone in this feeling. I had a best friend in high school who also was intrigued with the Greek gods, and so that kind of helped things along. But it was really Drawing Down the Moon that, indicated to me that, wow, there's some stuff out there that's really interesting. And that's really where I found my first interest with Druidry.
Okay. So Drawing Down the Moon brings Druidry to your attention. What was it about Druidry that pulled you in versus the coverage of other pagan faiths?
There were really two things in there that caught my interest. One of them was Circle Sanctuary with Selena Fox. And I thought, wow, this is kind of cool stuff. And so I decided to subscribe to her magazine, Circle Network News. And the other thing that I found really super interesting in Drawing Down the Moon was a discussion about this group called the New Reformed Druids of North America, NRDNA. And their leader was, or one of their leaders, was a gentleman named Isaac Bonewits. And so I wrote to Isaac, and I said, hey, I'm really interested in NRDNA. What can you tell me about it? What can I do? And he said, I'd be glad to talk to you about NRDNA, but I'm starting this new group, and for $35, you can get in on the ground floor. And this group was called Arnriach Fane. So I sent him money, joined ADF on the 10th of March, 1984. And that was really my introduction to, ADF Druidry. And, that was the beginning of my path with ADF.
Wow. So you've been with ADF since the very beginning.
I was, I think, the 8th person to join.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with being number 8. You're just one short of that most sacred number.
Absolutely.
9. Okay, so you're in on the ground floor of the ADF, and some time goes by. I mean, I think this is a good chance to ask what looks different today in the ADF versus the way it looked before.
Wow.
I mean, it's had to go through a lot of changes.
Yeah, the early days of ADF, a lot of the liturgy was carried over from RDNA. The idea of the Earth Mother coming first is really a carryover, in my opinion, from RDNA days. The idea of doing an omen comes from RDNA, although the omen in RDNA is different. You basically go to the 4 directions and ask for input from the sacrifice that you offer, as opposed to more of the sortilege that we see in ADF now. But the idea of making offerings, and there was a thing called the Catechism of the Waters of Life, which is actually very beautiful, was part of the early ADF liturgy. That is basically a call and response about the waters of life and the Earth Mother. So a lot of the liturgy was kind of something new. It was called the Standard Liturgical Order. You can find it on the ADF website. But the early days of ADF were mail-based. We would get things in the mail. Druid's Progress was the original kind of mimeographed magazine, and it would come out. And it came out rather infrequently in the beginning. And so it was a question of really waiting for something to come in the mail from ADF to see what to do next. So it was, it was a very slow kind of iterative process, fast as the Speeding Oak really did capture that whole thing. It took, I think the first 4 issues of Druid Progress, it was like 2.5 years before they came out. So it was really kind of slow. And so, it was really through publications and books that, information was gleaned. And so what I had to do, because I was a solitary for almost 20 years, and I built my practice off of, looking at publications that I got. And, over that time, ADF grew. There was some, changes of, Isaac came and went. Fox was elected Archdruid. There was a number of changes in the early days. So the whole idea of electing an Archdruid was something that was rather new. And the organization grew. There was some, ideas about how things held together. The Generalist Study Program and the Initiate Program, which came later, were ideas about having, tracks of information. And for study program, the original big study program in ADF was called Super Druid. It had a number of levels, and it was actually a fairly complicated thing. So the training programs have changed over time. The demographics of ADF have changed over time. It really was a North American phenomena, I believe, in the early days, and now we're international. But I think that the liturgy has evolved. The internet has been a huge, huge boon for ADF and Druidry and paganism in general, because we can share what we do with other people, even in real time. So it's we've gone from being, a very male-based, very, primitive structured organization to something that's much more streamlined and, part of the electronic or the, information age.
That's true. I've seen quite a bit of that change myself over the years of being part of ADF. Now, before we get too far, though, I've got plenty of listeners who may not understand what the difference is between a Druid and other pagans. So how would you define Druid versus other pagans?
Well, I think that pagans, I will venture to say that pagans are polytheists who hearken to especially in the Indo-European world, to pre-Christian times. They were the people who originally worship the gods. Isaac talked about three kinds of pagans. He called paleo-pagans and meso-pagans and then neo-pagans. And the paleo-pagans were really the original pagans, people who worshiped the gods before Christianity came along. And then the meso-pagans were the ones that kind of rediscovered it during the Druidic revival. And then the neo-pagans are us today. But I think that the term Druid really comes from a period of time in Western Europe, especially in Gaul and the British Isles, along with Scotland and Ireland and Wales, where there were it was a religious structure, a learned group of people who were called the Druids. And to some of those, the idea of bardic skills or ovate skills being herbal or divinatory, and then Druidic skills were people who were had functions that would be like, I don't know, lawgivers or judges, perhaps. The notion of a learned class of people was, I think, where the original Druids came from. And because that group of people that may have existed, I mean, because they were part of this paganism at the time, the kind of paganism that we envision from that part of the world, I think we call Druidry. So a Druid is really a nature-based or a nature-aware group of pagans that have roots or some commonalities in the Indo-European world, especially Western Europe.
Okay, fair enough. Now, your role as an Archdruid in a major Druid fellowship is pretty unique in the world of paganism. That's being put on a pretty big pedestal and under a pretty bright spotlight. So, what made you seek an office like that?
I decided about 20 years into my ADF life that I wanted to start doing some stuff for the organization. It's a volunteer organization, and I started off by being the list master. The lists were fairly active back then, the e-lists, the email lists, and it was kind of the wild, wild west. There was what I thought was some incivility there, and I wanted to try to make the lists a more civil place to discourse. So I got involved as the list master, and it gave me the ability to read all the lists, which was a monumental task at the time. And they're still fairly active. And as I did that, I thought, well, maybe I'll get involved in some other stuff. So I ran several times unsuccessfully for Upper Midwest Regional Druid. And then I did win that position, and I enjoyed interacting with people in the Upper Midwest. I did a lot of traveling to groves and proto-groves. And I thought, well, maybe I can do more. I ran for the Mother Grove unsuccessfully. And then I became the chief of the Council of Regional Druids and got a Mother Grove seat on it. And I found the Mother Grove to be really pretty fascinating. Some of the topics that we had to deal with, really kind of board of director stuff, but for a religious organization. And I liked the people that I worked with. And one thing led to another. I ran as Vice Archdruid. I was Vice Archdruid under Kirk. And I found that, I liked what was going on when Kirk decided to step down. I was encouraged by people to run for Archdruid, and I thought that might be an interesting thing to do, and so I ran for it, and I was successful in getting that job.
Yeah, and you've had the job now for almost, 2 years?
I'm in my third year, beginning of my third year now.
Okay. So in that time, I'm sure you had some experience with the Mother Grove before you took the office, but you never had that actual seat. I'm sure there's been some challenges and things that have come up that have sort of altered some of your views on things. So what kind of beliefs did you have going into this leadership position maybe 5 years ago that have morphed and changed with the experiences of being in the position?
Well, that's a good question. That's kind of a tough one. I think that the one thing I learned pretty quickly is that while I'm the Archdruid, I have one vote out of 9. It's not like I'm the Lord of the Mother Grove, because I'm certainly not. I think that we're 9 peers on the board of director. I do offer some leadership, or at least I try to. There really is a lot to be said about working together with other people in the Mother Grove and other people in the organization. I feel that the people in leadership, especially in the Mother Grove, really want what's best for the organization. I'm an optimist at heart, and so that belief goes along with that. I think that there's, flexibility is the key to enlightenment, I think, and also the key to making things work. And I think we have to listen to each other and see what other people bring to the table. So I think that, I have a general idea where the organization is going, but I think that the path for it to get there, may not be the same every day or every year. So I think people have to be flexible, and I try to be as flexible as I can.
That's good advice. Yeah, I'm also on the high read of the Troth, so I've got a good taste of those leadership challenges myself, and I think you're absolutely right. That flexibility is key. Now, go ahead.
No, I was just going to agree with you. I really think so.
Yeah. Now, you had the unfortunate pleasure of being on the Mother Grove, I guess I could say, when a real firestorm comes up about the very founder of ADF recently,
right,
concerning Isaac. How do you feel reflecting back on that whole situation?
Well, that
the ADF handled it.
I think we did okay. We put out, we communicated with our members as quickly as we could. The whole nature of that information came to us kind of unexpectedly, and it was kind of a moving target. We really didn't know a lot of the stuff that was going on, and it kind of unfolded while we were looking into it. So I think that we tried to be open with our members. We listened to our members. People were doing a lot of talking. It was a complicated situation because we were trying to be very supportive and understanding of, what may have happened in this instance, even though it was, before ADF was created. And, the other challenge was that Isaac wasn't there to respond to things. So we had to kind of, walk a fine line. And I think that what we took from that was that we wanted to create a culture in ADF that was a culture of safety, where things couldn't or shouldn't happen, that may have happened in other instances or in other situations. So what we did is our Mother Grove, our regional druids, and our clergy all took a consent culture course from Cherry Hill Seminary, and other senior druids and grove organizers have taken it subsequently. And the idea was to try to have our leadership have an understanding of consent culture and move that forward. And that was a big effort. It was we invested some resources, monetarily and time-wise, to get that done. It's something that we want to continue doing. We want to have our senior Druids and Grove organizers in the future, or future Mother Grove members, take that course or a course like it. We want our people to be aware so that we don't have situations where the lack of consent comes into play.
No, I agree, and I'll go on record saying I think the ADF did a good job handling and navigating the response to that, especially when we were so proactive about getting key people trained in consent and what that means, and to build a culture of safety. So I do applaud you on that effort.
Thanks. It's I think it was something that was necessary. We had talked about having ADF be a safe place before this happened, and I think it's just we want people to be able to come to our rituals or come to our festivals and not have to worry about safety. And one of the things that I've asked as part of this was that the first course or the first workshop in any festival, ADF festival, be dedicated to consent culture. And I went to the Upper Midwest Regional Gathering a couple weeks ago. First workshop was on consent culture. I went to Texas Invoke. First workshop was on consent culture. Same thing at PantheaCon. I think that we talked about this, and I think that's a good way to start things, because people understand then at the very beginning that this is, what's important to us and how we're trying to frame, the days that we're going to be together as part of this idea of consent. So we're working on it.
Yeah, it's a good place to start. You've mentioned that you were a solitary for a long time.
Right.
And yet you've worked your way up all the way to a position of leadership. And I have a great deal in common with you in that I've achieved stewardship of Illinois in the Troth and a seat on the High Rede, both mostly working most of my life solitary in my religion. And I've got my own experiences in that, but this show's not about me, Jon. So what sort of challenges and benefits alike have you experienced going through all this as a solitary?
Well, I think that one thing that's really crucial to what we do as a religion, it is practice, is what we do. We may talk about things and all that kind of stuff, but it really comes down to the work that we do for ourselves, for the kindreds, for the Earth Mother. Being a solitary, especially in the early days, there wasn't a lot of material, so it was kind of organic. You kind of built things along the way. And so the biggest challenge for me was to develop a practice without really understanding a lot about what was involved with ADF. As material came out and as liturgy was offered, then I would be like, oh, I can use this. And, it was like having a guidebook kind of on how to do those things. I think that people who are solitary, the challenge is community, because over half of our members are solitary, and I know that it's difficult sometimes because there's nobody else out there. I mean, I was in the Chicago area. I did get together with Druids on occasion and, have a barbecue or a picnic or something. But for someone who lives in a more remote location, it really makes it more difficult. So the part of the challenge of being a solitary is, the encouragement to continue on, or material that you can use to build your own practice. Today, it's a lot different. I remember when my first ritual I went to with Shining Lakes Grove in Michigan, I was like, wow. When I saw their ritual, I was like, I do those things just like they do. And there was some other stuff that they did that blew me, oh my goodness, that is so cool. I want to do that. So the advantage to seeing somebody else do something really was educational, especially for a person who only had it on paper before then. So that was a challenge of the past. It is still a challenge in the present, but one of the things that I encouraged our clergy council to do, and it's continuing now, is to do videos of the high days. In the first few videos, I think we did Northern Hemisphere rituals that were focused on Northern and Southern Hemisphere. Because, when we're celebrating Lunasa here, people in the Southern Hemisphere are celebrating Imbolc, to use an example. So that people have those videos, and I know that Ian Corrigan, for example, had some videos out there, and there's other groves and members who put videos out there, but the clergy videos show, different priests doing different parts of the core order of ritual. And I think that's really helpful for people's practice to see what the liturgy looks like. One of the challenges, though, I think, in general, is I believe that Druidry and ADF Druidry and paganism requires more than just 8 high days a year. I think you have to develop a devotional practice that really spans, that spans a larger period of time than that, so that you're doing something every day or every week or following the practice. I think if you wait every 6 weeks, there's a lot of space in there. And so I published a book last year called A Tree for the Earth Mother, which was a book full of Earth Mother practices or Earth Mother devotionals from some ADF members, also from Philip Cargum, Christopher Hughes, Dave the Bard. Some of them in foreign language. We had some Spanish items and some Welsh items. This is not really shameless self-promotion, but the idea was to put some stuff out there so people could say, oh, if I want to do a devotional practice, I can just read this. And some of them are very brief. And I think that it's important for solitary members to develop that practice because it keeps them interested and keeps them involved and keeps them in process of doing Druidic kind of things. I like with any practice that you do, whether it's cooking or whatever the case may be, if you don't do it occasionally, then the problem becomes you kind of lose interest in it, or it becomes stale. So I think that more intimate practice or more devotional practice is a way of getting around that, and I think that's part of the challenge of being a solitary. Part of the benefits of being a solitary is that you kind of have to grow your stuff organically while you see other people doing things. You take those same things and make them your own. And I've seen, some of the stuff I've heard from people, whether they're grove members or solitaries, of what they do and some of the things they do. It's just beautiful that people have come up with these things. And devotional is more than just saying words. It's doing art or singing or all kinds of things. And just the number of things that our people do out there is really pretty remarkable. So there's, while there's strength in numbers in groves and proto-groves, we have some very strong solitary members as well who do the work. I know that's kind of a long-winded answer for your question, but...
Nope, that's perfect. In fact, it leads me to wonder a few things. How, especially as a leader, we get new members that join an organization, ideally every day, but there's new members coming in all the time, and they get the material. And let's say we're talking about those solitary practitioners who are out there and they don't have a community around them to help them build this practice, and they're really hyper curious. They're ready to jump right in. They get started, and maybe they are just doing the every 6 week thing you're talking about.
Right.
How do you nudge someone to not just do the holidays? What do you dangle in front of them that convinces them to do the work?
I think that, what happens when people first join is that there's a number of people that write to them and say, hey, welcome to ADF. If we can help you, let us know. So we open the door for people, and some people do take us up on that. I think most people don't, but many people do. Oak Leaves, our publication, is full of really good information. Druid's progress in the early days became Oak Leaves in the latter days, in the current time frame. And there's really good material in there. And I think for people who subscribe to that, they have the ability to get that every 3 months and say, wow, I could be doing that. We also have old issues of that on the website, which any of our members can see the older issues. If they're subscribers, they can look at the current stuff. If they're not, I think they can see things that are 2 years old and further back. So I think that there is the material out there. The question is, how do we communicate to people, what the different things that we can do? And what we do is we really try to use Facebook, and we put, rituals out there, or we do workshops at festivals, whether they're ADF festivals or not, and try to show people, the beauty of doing devotionals or doing liturgy or doing things of this nature. Other people have put rituals out, workshops and rituals on YouTube. Some of our groves, the Three Cranes Grove does, and other groves as well. They stream information or stream practices that they do. These are different ways of reaching out to people and saying, hey, here's what we're doing, and just give them an example that they could build off of.
Okay, yeah, all very good strategies. I mean, you've got to put information in front of people. You just hope that the fire burns hot enough that they want to do it.
Right.
And I think another challenge we're thinking about are people who come to paganism of any kind, and because they're curious and they don't feel a connection or something in the religion they grew up in. But over time of being a solitary, maybe a year, maybe 2 goes by, and they see churches on every corner in their town, and their friends and family members got these little communities they're part of, and they start to long for that connection. And I wonder sometimes if we're losing people, not from just a lack of doing the work, but we lose people to just a need to be connected to other human beings following a similar spiritual path.
I think that we do. I mean, while we may wish that YouTube and streaming would replace, sitting down to supper with somebody at your local church, I don't think that it does. A lot of Christian churches are very welcoming. They're like, come and visit us, come and spend time with us, or come and do fellowship with us. And, having someone there right next to you is a huge thing. And so we may lose people to that. And, it's challenging in a world where we have members on almost all the continents on the planet. Some of them are very, there's a lot of distance between some of them. So I don't know how to bridge that gap other than using electronic means at this point. But I think you're right.
I can say from my own personal experience in other organizations, one thing that has been a major benefit and influence to me is having a mentor and student relationship. One where I'm not ever left alone just to figure it out. I can always turn to someone who I built a relationship with over time for further assistance, further insight, and for that high five, that pat on the back, and also that kick in the ass to say, hey,
right.
What have you been doing lately? And I think that's an element in modern paganism that could really be added to the mix everywhere I see. And it's just not something I see very often.
We do offer mentors to people in ADF, but typically what happens is people will ask for them and say, I'm working on my Dedekind program. Can I get a mentor? And I know that myself and others do reach out to people and say, hey, if we can help, let us know. And as I said, some people have taken me and others up on that. And, I don't know that it's necessarily like a very one-on-one relationship. I talk to a lot of people, but I think that would be helpful. We don't, the number of mentors we have is limited. Basically, the idea of mentorship is, revolves around training programs. But, we do offer some online chats. On Tuesday nights, for example, we have ADF IRC chat. I know IRC is not the most modern thing, but it's a way for people to chat. And there's one that also goes on at 2:00 in the afternoon Eastern time on Sundays, which is the European chat, where people get together and talk. And it's a way for people to get to know some other people and ask some questions. I think it doesn't appeal to a really large population of our membership, but I think it appeals to some. And, we're always trying to think of new ways to reach out to people and engage them.
Excellent. And I know those are offered. I'm one of those dedicated program mentors, and I occasionally get an email that fits what I said I'd help mentor. And, sometimes the student is really engaged and sometimes they're not.
Right.
And I don't know how to solve that problem, but I think it's something that's well worth everyone's time to figure out. Now, with the challenge of solitaries being one thing we know is something we always have to face and deal with, especially in your position. What is another challenge you think faces modern paganism, and what would you do about it?
Another challenge about modern paganism. I think one of the beauties of ADF, and I'm not trying to just schlep ADF here, but early on, the idea behind ADF was that we use scholarship to build our paganism, and I think that was a reaction to books or teachers who kind of put stuff out there that wasn't necessarily historically accurate. Granted, at the time in the 70s and the 80s, there wasn't the great wealth of online information there is today. But I think that, finding reliable sources and, reliable methods of practice is a challenging thing. And I think that, when people put out information or book lists or lists of resources for other people to look at, I think that's really a good thing, because it allows, you say, hey, here's 40 books that are really good. And so an individual can take one of those books or two of those books and read them and then move on to the next one. It's a way of kind of providing readability and reliability all at the same time by giving people what we consider to be, better material. There's so much, material that's out there right now, and some of it's really pretty fascinating. And I think once people get involved with that, that's it really helps them out. I think one of the things that organized religion brings is the sense of community, and community has wonderful benefits in that it brings people together. People of a like mind or a like desire come together and can spend time together or worship together or study together. These are great things. One of the real challenges in any group dynamic is safety. And I think that paganism in the past, there were instances where there were a lot of coercion, or in certain groups, coercion, or a lot of non-consent based activities that pushed people away from paganism because they said, wow, I've got to do A to be able to remain a member, or I have to do B in order to move up in the organization. And I think that in ADF, we try to vet our leaders, especially priests and Mother Grove members, check their backgrounds and make sure that the leaders that we're putting out there are people who are safe for other people. So I think that the challenge of safety and leadership is a big thing, especially with smaller groups.
No, I agree. Safety is absolutely a concern. In fact, I have daughters. Two of my older daughters are actually expressing a lot of interest in paganism and witchcraft, more specifically. And the first thing I wanted to tell them was, most of the monsters you'll ever encounter when you get involved are just as human as you are. And there are still people out there who are insisting that sex is necessary to move up the ranks, that sex is necessary to get involved in circles and groups and gatherings. And it's sad that those people are out there and they exist, but I think it's worth spelling it out and making it very clear that they are monsters and they deserve no time nor respect from anyone.
I totally agree. That's really a huge part of consent culture. And, there's an example in the book the consent culture course that we used, that was exactly along those lines in a group that, it happened to be witchcraft. It could be anything. It could be Druids. It could be Masons. And it was, a situation where the person was told, you must do this to get this prize. And, but you're right, that's monstrous. And, I think that the idea of consent goes a long way to protect people from that.
I agree. Now, let's move on to a little lighter subject.
Okay.
I've seen you say in discussions, in fact, even in recent discussion in ADF forums, that you honor your house spirits. So when you talk about house spirits, what are they and how does your relationship with them influence your day-to-day life? I think we might even be digging into your daily working here.
Absolutely. I do daily devotionals. I do a series of them, more than one. And my household spirits are a part of it. I won't get into a long, drawn-out discussion of how I discovered household spirits, but the theory that I was told is that when a house or a structure is built on land, you displace whatever spirits were on that land. And they have to go someplace, and they usually go up, meaning into the structure. And these spirits are good, bad, indifferent, different shades of gray, whatever the case may be. They're very different and very varied. The Romans had lares, household spirits, penates, which were, ancestral spirits, all part of this living ancestral or nature spirit-based world that we live in. It wasn't just a person living in a house. It was a person living in a house or a structure with ancestors and with spirits of the place. Spirits of the place, I think, are in many structures. I became aware of them in the last 5 years, and they've probably been in my life forever. Looking back, I think that they really were. It's just we don't necessarily recognize them. Spirits of the place are spirits that share the home space or the yard space with you, and then the other members of your household, whether they're animal, mineral, vegetable, or human. And I think that it's really about hospitality, what I consider to be our greatest virtue. And the hospitality extends in us giving the spirits of the place, our household spirits, a place to live in our home and making offerings to them, because they return things to us as well. They share the space with us, and I think that they look out for us. I believe that there is a beneficial relationship between ourselves and the spirits of place that live in our homes. And I think that by honoring them with offerings, gifts, and recognition, speaking their name, goes a long way. And I think doing that on a daily basis is a good thing to honor the spirits that live with you. I have a story I always tell is that I have a friend who's a Brahmin, and what he does every day is he gets up in the morning, and this is going to be kind of light, but gets up in the morning, goes to the bathroom, cleanses themselves, and prays. And that's really what I do. I get up in the morning and I let the dog out. I wash my hands, and I make offerings at my household spirit altar. I say, I welcome to you my lares. I welcome to you to another day of friendship and peace. Thank you for watching over my home, my hearth, and my family. And what I'm doing at that point is I'm anointing a stone, which I use as kind of an analog for a temple structure, and I'm anointing it with water as I'm saying these words. And I've got a little little glass with whiskey in it, because I think whiskey is a good offering because it evaporates. So it evaporates as part of the natural world, but I think that it also evaporates as the spirits consume those spirits. So I think it's it's a natural process of evaporation and also a spiritual practice of consuming those gifts that we give them. And I feel that they watch over us. I feel a certain sense of safety and peace, honestly, and knowing that my household spirits are here and that we can interact together in this way.
Now, you said you became aware of them 5 years ago. What happened?
I moved into I believe in the physical world. There are physical laws that apply, and it makes our cell phones work and doors open and gravity and all that other good stuff. I moved into an apartment. I brought a couple boxes into the apartment, and I brought my cell phone. I put the cell phone in the bathroom. I started to walk down the stairs. It was on the second floor. I realized I don't like to have my phone without me because I'm on call sometimes. So I go back into the bathroom, and the phone is gone. So, long story short, I found the phone on top of the door in another room. There was nobody else in the apartment but me, and I hadn't gone to the other room yet. So I was like, I talked to a couple people and said, what do you think? And they were like, sounds like friendly spirits, sounds like household spirits make offerings. And so over time, sometimes keys disappear, sometimes things are out of place, and then they show up again. I have cats, but they can't carry heavy things. And so I just found that by, developing a devotional practice, I had a little spirit house that someone had given me as a gift a number of years ago. And I put that spirit house next to the offering things that I use for my household spirits. Because a friend of mine said, well, you've displaced them. They need a place to live. So I have a spirit house that I feel that, the spirits of the place can go to if they need to. So it just was, realizing that there was something else in the apartment with me. And I think there was something there. I felt that there was something there once my awareness was drawn to it through the cell phone, disappearance, reappearance thing. And I really honestly felt very secure in that apartment, knowing that household spirit was there. Uh-oh, I think I lost you. There you go.
Nope, I'm still here.
Okay. And so I found great comfort in that. And then when I moved from that apartment to the home that I now live in, this house is 102 years old. I went through a little ritual where I asked the household spirits that wanted to come with me to, I had a methodology that I used to, carry them with me to my new place. And I think some of them followed me. The big, really friendly, really helpful household spirit, I think, is still where it was. I think it's in that place. And we find these, the idea of household spirits is found through many cultures. And it's not something that, I think is unusual. Maybe it's unusual in the modern world, but it's 2018 and everything is electronic, and then we have satellites and spaceships, but I think we still have household spirits.
Yeah, I don't think household spirits care if we're in a wagon or a car when we pull up in a driveway. They're just going to be where they're at. But it's interesting that you say it that way. Let's imagine that someone comes to you and they say they think their house is haunted. They've got ghosts of some kind, and they've eliminated every single other possibility. They've gone through and checked every kind of way they can to explain it rationally, and they're left with no other explanation. Shit's flying around, doors are slamming, they're hearing voices,
Right.
Phones are disappearing, and they think, oh, you know what? John, the guy down the street, he's in all this stuff. He can help. What would you do to help him?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is what I've told other people who've asked me the same question, is I would say, make offerings. Instead of assuming that these things are bad things, try to establish a rapport with them. Because, a lot of people, they move into a new place and they smudge. It's like, they get like the cosmic Lysol out and like clear everything out of the place. And that's not very hospitable. And maybe that sounds odd, but I think that, make offerings to the spirits of the place, even if weird stuff has been happening, and see if it gets any better. If it doesn't get better, well, then there's cleansing, methodologies that we can use to try to clear the space. But I would try to come to an understanding first with the other, people you're sharing space with.
Sure. And they look at you and they say, I don't know what you mean when you say make offerings. What does that look like to someone who thinks they're dealing with a haunted house?
Well, I would just say, there are probably spirits that live in this house, and they may not be negative or evil spirits. They could just be spirits. And, they don't know how to communicate with you. They may have been trying to communicate with you and it's not working. So they break stuff or throw stuff across the room or other weird or slam doors, trying to get your attention. So why don't you set aside a little place in your home, put a little glass of whiskey or a little glass of some offering there and see what happens. And I would say to them, try it for a few days, try it for a couple of weeks. If it doesn't work at the end of 2 weeks, then we'll go to plan B.
I think it's great advice. Absolutely great advice. Now, after a subject like house spirits and dealing with hauntings, I think this is the best question to go into. What's something unusual that you do in your Druidry practice, your own practice, that someone who's not a Druid would consider to be unusual or even absurd?
Probably the anointing of, I use a stone in my daily workings. I call it a Hawassi stone. The Hittites use these things called Hawassi stones. And so I anoint from this little cup of water, I anoint this stone every morning as I say my words. So probably if somebody saw me anointing a stone and saying words to it, they would probably think that I was, unusual for that.
Yeah. People, you may have to explain that to somebody, what's going on with the stone. What advice would you give to somebody who is listening to this show and they get interested in becoming a Druid or at least want to explore paganism?
There are a couple of really good sites out there. I would encourage them to look at the ADF website, the RDNA website at rdna.info, probably the biggest website with Druidry information anywhere, thousands and thousands of pages, and Druidry.org, which is the OBOD site, or write to me. Or find me on Facebook or whatever and ask me some questions. And if I can't answer them, I can try to point people in the right direction. There's a lot of really good information out there and some really good books. Solitary Druid by Skip Ellison. Great book, especially for solitaries.
All right, cool. And what advice do you think they should ignore?
What advice should they ignore? Wow, that's a tough one. I would just say don't take any wood nickels. If things don't make sense to you or don't seem right to you, follow your intuition and don't do what you don't think is right.
Yeah, I agree. All too often we fail to listen to our own bodies, and our bodies are a big part of our lives. Clearly, it's how we move and interact in the world. So listen to it, folks. Like he said, don't do anything you don't want to do.
Right.
Well, Jon, we've come towards the end of the show here, and I think we've covered a good bit of information, especially when it comes to pagan leadership. People are going to get their money's worth there. Is there something you wanted to talk about that perhaps I haven't gotten to or covered?
Yeah, just one thing really briefly. In talking about the northern and the southern hemispheres, we kind of look at ourselves in kind of an insular way in that, we like when summer solstice come up, we're like, summer solstice, it's all about this. But I think it's also important to remember that the winter solstice is also happening on the other side of the globe in the southern hemisphere. So we're never really doing one thing. We're doing one thing and the opposite at all at the same time. So it's not just like we're moving down a straight line. It's like we're moving along a wheel that's always spinning. And I think that we need to keep in mind that our practice really is kind of a mixture of what's going on here and what's going on in other places, and as kind of a unified whole.
Is that something you think we should all be recognizing in our personal practice, like actively?
I think for people who are interested in it, yes. I don't think it's ultimately necessary, but I think it's good to realize that when we celebrate something, it's really, if we look at it on a local level, hey, it's in bulk. If we look at it on a global level, it's in bulk and through NASA all at the same time. The coming of the light and really bright light all at the same time. So it's this unified whole thing, which I think we'll eventually appreciate more.
Yeah, okay. And since you are in a position of leadership for a very specific organization, and this is going to be shared with said members of organization, I'm going to give you a chance to deliver a specific message to the members of ADF. What would you like them to hear?
I think that, continue your practice, look to your virtues. Hospitality is our greatest virtue. Be hospitable to yourself and to others. And, keep in mind that the Earth Mother and the kindreds are a part of your world and a part of your practice as well. And if you ever have any questions for our people in leadership, don't hesitate to ask. We're more than willing to listen.
Excellent. All right, Jon, thank you again for being here. It was such a great pleasure to talk to you, and I'm incredibly honored by you being here.
And I really appreciate the time to talk to you, Lonnie. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And for everybody out there who's listening, remember, if you want to hear the bonus questions I'm going to go over with Jon, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio. And for $1 up to $5 a month, you gain access to all the member-only benefits. In the meantime, thank you all for being here. You can find the show anywhere on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and any of those podcast apps that you like to use on your mobile devices. Everybody out there, stay weird, my friends.
Okay, gang, that's a wrap on this episode of Weird Web Radio. Once again, thank you all for listening. Now, it's time for you to go join the official Weird Web Radio membership. Go to patreon.com/weirdwebradio and you can choose your rewards and become a member today. Enjoy all the exclusive benefits, inside information, and plenty of bonus audio with each guest. Now, you can find the show at weirdwebradio.com and weirdwebradio.libsyn.com. The show is listed on Facebook and Twitter as Weird Web Radio, and you can find me on Instagram as just Lonnie_Scott. Please remember to rate and comment and share the shows that you like, and it helps others find us in all the search results. Shoot me an email if you want to be a guest on the show, or if you know someone that would be a great guest in upcoming episodes. You can send that to weirdwebradio@gmail.com. Seek the mysteries and delights in life, my friends. As always, stay weird out there.